The scorching sun glared down on the tarmac at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport as a discreet U.S. Air Force C-40 jet touched down. It was a quiet arrival. No cameras, no press. On board sat General Michael Langley, commander of U.S. Africa Command. Officially, he was here to discuss regional cooperation, but beneath the surface, his real mission was buried in secrecy. Inside that jet was a man on a mission not just to stabilize, but to surgically remove what Washington had started to call the African wildfire. Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. Langley knew this wouldn't be easy. Traoré wasn't just a leader, he had become a symbol, and symbols in the hands of the right people could change continents. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. This is where fiction meets geopolitical reality. Let's keep going. The plane's cabin remained silent, the hum of the engines fading as they taxied to a classified hangar far from the civilian terminals. Langley straightened his coat, checked his briefing file, and nodded to his aide. The operation had begun. Langley's convoy rolled through the outskirts of Nairobi by dusk. No sirens, no flags, just dark SUVs and tinted windows. His destination, a nondescript compound used by American intelligence and joint Kenyan operations. Inside the building, cooled by fans and humming with quiet urgency, Langley was met by an embedded analyst, codename Falcon. General, Falcon began, Traoré hasn't used a personal device in 3 weeks, no digital footprint. The compound in Ouagadougou is on full lockdown, guard rotation every 4 hours. Inner circle is pure Burkina, but his security Wagner-trained. Langley folded his arms, staring at the live drone feed displayed on the wall. The outline of Traoré's compound glowed faintly in infrared. Wagner, he muttered. Always them, always the same pattern. Falcon nodded. If we're going to act, we'll need regional help. Kenya, Djibouti, maybe even Chad, but fast. His influence is spreading. Langley turned to the team. This mission isn't about one man. It's about stopping the next wave before it catches fire. Traoré is the spark. Thousands of kilometers away in Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat in a dimly lit strategy room, lit by a single oil lamp. Power was unreliable these days, but the fire in his eyes burned steady. An aide rushed in, breathless. Langley just landed in Nairobi. CIA chatter says it's not a routine trip. Traoré smirked slightly, shaking his head. They sent a general halfway around the world just to talk about partnerships. They're planning something. We should prepare an exit strategy, the aide said. No, Traoré answered. We face them here. If they want to fight, they'll get it in our homeland. Back in Nairobi, Langley entered a secure meeting bunker beneath the Kenyan Ministry of Defense. Waiting for him was General Francis Ogolla, Kenya's top military commander. Ogolla handed him a folder labeled Operation Stabilizer. You want to move troops through our border. Covert ops staged from our soil. You're asking a lot, General. Langley opened the file and placed a satellite image on the table. It showed Russian cargo planes unloading at a secluded airstrip in northern Burkina Faso. Traoré is building alliances fast. If we wait, he'll have Moscow and Beijing fully behind him. Then there's no clean way in. Ogolla raised an eyebrow. And your plan? Langley leaned in. Quiet, extraction, surgical. We remove him, replace him with a transitional government. No fingerprints. Ogolla nodded slowly. Kenya can't be caught in the middle of another Cold War. Langley gave him a hard look. You're not. You're preventing one. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov reviewed a red file marked Confidential West Africa. Langley has moved to Kenya, he said aloud. They're planning something. An aide leaned in. Do we intervene? Lavrov's face was expressionless. Not yet, but if they touch Traoré, we answer. In Washington, President Joe Biden stood in the Situation Room, listening as Langley's voice came through the encrypted channel. The window's closing. Every day we delay, Traoré gets stronger. If we don't act now, he'll unite Mali, Niger, and maybe Congo under a single anti-Western bloc. Biden looked around at his advisors. And the fallout? Langley didn't hesitate. Containable, if we do it right. Keep it covert, Biden ordered. No boots, just intel and precision. Langley's response was firm. Understood. In Ouagadougou, Traoré stood before a crowd of local journalists and loyal officers. He wore a plain green military shirt, no medals, only presence. They do not come for peace, he said into the mic. They come to keep us small, weak, dependent. The crowd clapped. Traoré raised his hand. We are not afraid of their generals. We are not afraid of their drones. This land is ours, and we will defend it. As he left the press briefing, his defense chief whispered urgently, We have signs of a mole. Someone in the outer ring may be feeding info. Traoré nodded grimly. Find him quietly. In Nairobi, Langley was prepping Phase 2, a covert meeting with AU intermediaries scheduled to happen under the guise of a peace-building conference, but the mission was far from peaceful. 2 U.S. special operators, embedded in Kenya under civilian cover, were already moving north to scout the Burkina Faso border. They were the eyes before the storm. Langley knew one thing. Once the first step was taken, there would be no return. This was no longer about diplomacy. It was containment. It was power. And above all, it was personal. The night was thick with tension across East Africa. Inside a secure hotel compound in Nairobi, General Michael Langley stood beside a large projector screen. A map of West Africa was displayed in soft blue light. Burkina Faso at the center, surrounded by highlighted border zones. Around the table were American diplomats, Kenyan military advisors, and a South African intelligence contact. Flown in under diplomatic cover, Langley cleared his throat. The mission was clear. Burkina Faso would be isolated, Traoré's inner circle disrupted, and when the time was right, the captain would fall. But it had to be done cleanly. No flags, no troops, just shadows. Langley pointed to the map. We begin by shutting the exits. Niger to the east, Ghana to the south, Mali already unstable. The only blind spot left is Togo. We'll get their intelligence chiefs on board, quietly. One of the South African reps leaned forward. And what about domestic blowback? If this leaks, you're talking about removing a sitting African leader. Langley didn't blink. We're not removing a leader. We're neutralizing a destabilizing agent before the continent fractures in two. Thousands of kilometers away, deep inside a government safe house in Ouagadougou, a man sat alone in the dark. His name, Colonel Seydou, head of counterintelligence. In his hands, a list of names. Someone inside Traoré's palace had been transmitting encrypted bursts late at night, small packets of metadata bouncing through third-party satellites. The list was narrowed down to 3 aides. One of them was a mole. But the timing was strange. The transmissions had only begun after Langley's arrival in Kenya. Colonel Seydou rubbed his eyes. Then he stood and reached for his pistol. In N'Djamena, the capital of Chad, Langley met with the Chadian defense minister under tight security. The two men spoke in whispers behind closed doors. Chad's president had been neutral publicly, but the Americans knew he feared the rising wave of West African nationalism. If Burkina Faso succeeded in resisting the West, others would follow. Langley laid out his proposal. We don't need troops, just a base to operate staging drones and support teams. We'll fund the operation. All you do is look the other way. The Chadian minister looked at the briefcase Langley had brought. Inside, more than just money, access, leverage, intelligence on regional rivals. He nodded. You'll have it, but make sure this ends fast. Back in Burkina Faso, Traoré had moved locations. The presidential palace was no longer secure. He now operated from a hidden military bunker in the outskirts of the city, guarded by hand-picked loyalists trained in both jungle and urban warfare. Traoré sat before a radio operator. What are they hearing? The operator turned a dial. Several intercepted U.S. comms filtered in, most scrambled, some clear. They're moving supplies into Chad. Something big is coming. Traoré sat back. Then we prepare for war. Not with tanks, with information. He tapped the table. Alert every station. Tell them to record everything. If they come for me, let the world see it live. In Addis Ababa, the African Union quietly convened an emergency session. A classified agenda was slipped under the door of every attending delegate. Unconfirmed intel, external plan to remove West African head of state. The session was heated. Some states demanded immediate condemnation of American involvement. Others, particularly those with U.S. funding, remained silent. The Ethiopian delegate slammed his fist on the desk. If this is allowed to happen, none of us are safe. Today, it's Traoré. Tomorrow, it's Kinshasa, Nairobi, Abuja. But AU leadership refused to make a statement. Not yet. Not without proof. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin reviewed an updated field brief. Langley's plan was progressing faster than expected. Phase 1, isolate Traoré, completed. Phase 2, disrupt logistics, underway. Phase 3, remove and extract Mani. Pending presidential green light, President Biden's chief of staff entered the room. The president wants deniability. If this leaks, we disavow. Understood? Austin gave a short nod. Tell Langley, make it surgical. Back in Nairobi, Langley sat alone in a command room. Multiple monitors flickered in front of him, satellite views, communications intercepts, troop movement overlays. He took a deep breath and pressed a secure comms button. Activate Ghost Protocol. A response came instantly. Ghost teams will be in Ouagadougou within 72 hours. Local extraction routes confirmed. Perimeter drones live. Langley didn't smile. He just nodded. Let's bring the fire before the forest burns. As the plan moved forward in Burkina Faso, something shifted, and one of Traoré's loyal aides, a young lieutenant named Khadija, approached him in private. Sir, I think Colonel Seydou is compromised. He's interrogating staff without clearance. He started purging anyone with foreign education. Traoré's eyes narrowed. We can't afford internal collapse. He leaned forward. Keep an eye on him. If he crosses the line, you know what to do. In the shadows of Bamako, Mali, a group of Russian advisors met inside a dimly lit compound, vodka on the table, blueprints pinned to the walls. Traoré is about to be targeted. We warned them. A senior officer lit a cigarette. We'll send equipment, not troops. If the Americans want to bleed, let them. At a discreet fuel depot in northern Kenya, unmarked American aircraft were being prepped. Drones, jammers, EMP tools, all loaded. Langley arrived on site for final inspection. The Kenyan general greeted him. It's ready. But you have 48 hours max. After that, my government starts asking questions. Langley extended his hand. Then we won't need 48. In Ouagadougou, Traoré stood on the roof of the underground bunker with a pair of binoculars. Below him, Hundreds of civilians were camped out in protest, shielding the compound, chanting his name. He spoke quietly to himself. Let them come, let them see the cost of empire. To the north, 2 U.S. ghost teams moved silently into position under cover of night. Each carried a single objective: find Traoré, extract him alive, or, if resistance is too high, neutralize. As the sun rose, the clock began ticking. The final phase was near. Dawn crept across the rooftops of Ouagadougou like a warning. The streets were unusually still, no calls to prayer, no traffic, just a city holding its breath. Inside an abandoned colonial-era church on the edge of the city, 2 ghost team operatives waited in silence. Their names were never spoken, their faces never seen. Each carried a tranquilizer kit, encrypted comms, and, only if needed, a suppressed sidearm. Above them, a surveillance drone hovered, beaming live heat signatures into Langley's command post in Nairobi. The target, a bunker 3 clicks west, hidden beneath a school once built by the French. The time, 3:17. At Langley's Nairobi command room, red lights flashed silently across the panel. General Langley stood behind his operators, eyes fixed on the feed. In his ear, 2 voices, one from Washington, the other from Djibouti. Washington's voice was clear. You have 20 minutes. If contact isn't made, abort. No casualties, no public engagement. Langley didn't answer. His eyes remained on the screen. Inside the bunker, Traoré was awake. He rarely slept these days. Too much to watch. Too much to feel through the walls. He looked at the map spread across the table, marked with U.S. base positions, NATO corridors, and Wagner outposts across Africa. He drew a circle over Niger. The first domino, he whispered. An aide entered. Sir, the mole is confirmed. It's Colonel Seydou. Traoré stood. Bring him, alive. 3 minutes later, Seydou was dragged in, bruised but silent. Traoré walked up slowly, speaking like a teacher disciplining a child. I trusted you with my shadows. You fed them to wolves. Seydou didn't flinch. You're too young to know what power does. They will come, Captain. And when they do, you'll understand the price of being the last candle in a room full of wind. Traoré stepped back. Take him below. No death. Not yet. At 3:27 a.m., Ghost Team Alpha reached the edge of the perimeter. Motion sensors triggered a silent red on Langley's console. One of the ghosts whispered into the mic. Thermal confirms. 20 to 30 bodies between us and the target. Mixture of armed guards and civilians. No clear route. Langley clenched his jaw. Command replied instantly. Abort. Repeat. Abort. Too hot. Langley stared at the map. 1 minute inside the compound. Khadija, Traoré's trusted lieutenant, and picked up faint radio chatter on the emergency band. She froze. Sir, someone's here. Traoré closed the map. Then they chose their moment. He turned to the guards. Stage 1. Flood the ground. Civilians outside the gates. Block every alley with people. If they fire, the world will see. At 3:30 a.m., Langley's monitor lit up with live crowd footage. Hundreds of civilians, barefoot and defiant, forming human barriers outside the compound. His operators looked up. They used them as shields. Langley exhaled sharply. Pull them out. No contact. Ghost Team Alpha began retreating silently into the night. Mission incomplete. Thousands of miles away in Geneva, the African Union's emergency broadcast went live. An intercepted drone feed had been leaked, showing an American drone circling the Burkina compound during the attempted breach. The AU head, Moussa Faki Mahamat, appeared on screen. This is not cooperation, this is aggression. We will not allow another era of puppet removals on this continent. The room erupted, social feeds exploded. From Dakar to Dar es Salaam, protests surged. In Nairobi, Langley sat alone in a dark briefing room watching Al Jazeera's headline scroll, Burkina Faso targeted in covert US operation, Langley denies involvement. He poured a glass of water with a shaking hand. His comms officer entered. Sir, the president wants you on record. You're being summoned to address the Senate Intelligence Committee within 48 hours. Langley didn't flinch. I'll go, but I won't lie. Back in Burkina Faso, Traoré stepped onto a makeshift podium inside his underground press chamber. Cameras flashed. The West came last night. They came not to talk, not to trade, but to silence. He raised a piece of debris, part of a US drone casing. This is your partnership. This is your diplomacy. Overnight, thousands flooded Ouagadougou streets. Young men and women chanting in French and Mossi, no to colonial clause. Burkina is not for sale. Across West Africa, embassies scrambled to secure staff. The US consulate in Mali went dark. In Niger, pro-Traoré graffiti flooded the capital. At CIA headquarters, Director William Burns watched the fallout unfold. He turned to his assistant. We lost control of the narrative. Langley's operation may have started clean, but it's now soaked in spotlight. Burns picked up the red phone. Put me through to Langley. Langley took the call, his voice exhausted. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Burns was blunt. It never is. The mission's over. Come home. Langley stared at the map one last time. Then he spoke quietly. Traoré's just one man, but he lit something we can't snuff out. Far away inside his bunker, Traoré sat quietly beside Khadija, who was nursing a bruise from the failed breach. Do you think they'll stop? She asked. Traoré answered, without looking up. Number, but next time. They won't come in shadows, they'll come with flags. He looked to the door. And we'll be ready. In Washington, D.C., the Senate Intelligence Committee chamber buzzed with press and tension. At the center of the room stood General Michael Langley, flanked by security. His uniform was sharp, but his eyes carried the weight of an operation gone wrong. Senator Mark Warren banged the gavel. General Langley, did you, or did you not, authorize a covert team to extract President Ibrahim Traoré from Burkina Faso? Langley took a deep breath. I acted under joint instruction from the Department of Defense and the National Security Council. The mission was intelligence-led. Extraction was only a contingency, never the objective. The chamber murmured. Warren leaned forward. But your teams were discovered. Civilians were placed at risk. Drone footage leaked to the press. The African Union has declared this an act of covert war. Langley's jaw clenched. We miscalculated the public sentiment. But let me be clear, Traoré has aligned himself with actors destabilizing regional peace. If we sit back, we lose all strategic leverage in West Africa. The room fell quiet. Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Traoré stood beside a new guest, Colonel Andrei Sokolov, a senior liaison of the Russian Wagner Group, stepped forward and extended his hand. Captain Traoré, Moscow sends its regards. You stood alone against the machine. We think it's time you had help. Traoré looked him in the eye. I don't need soldiers. I need tools, communications jammers, cybersecurity, eyes in the sky. Sokolov nodded. Then you shall have them. In Beijing, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a vague but firm statement. China respects the sovereignty of Burkina Faso and urges all nations to avoid unilateral actions in Africa. Behind closed doors, a quiet deal was struck. Chinese satellite data and encrypted telecommunications support in exchange for rare earth mining rights. Back in Nairobi, Langley sat in the dark. His security clearance had been downgraded. He was no longer in charge of West Africa operations, but he was still watching. His deputy entered with a hard drive. intercepted file. Traoré's bunkers issuing encrypted videos every 3 hours, public morale campaigns. Langley plugged in the drive. Traoré appeared on screen, calm, confident, surrounded by students, farmers, even musicians. To Africa, he looked like a lion. To Langley, a dangerous symbol of defiance. At CIA headquarters, Director Burns was in crisis mode. Langley's hearing had backfired. The AU was threatening to expel all U.S. military liaisons from its peacekeeping partnerships. Several African nations were calling for sanctions. Burns turned to cyber ops. If we can't remove him physically, we erase him digitally. Operation Silent Cloud launched the next morning. Traoré's state websites were taken offline. News sites supportive of his government began displaying 403 errors. Facebook pages vanished. Bank transactions were delayed. Government apps failed to load. Inside the bunker, Khadija frowned. This isn't a system glitch, it's a digital siege? Traoré nodded. Then we fight back in their language. He summoned an elite team of local developers, trained abroad but fiercely loyal. Within 72 hours, a new blockchain-based communication network launched in Ouagadougou. No servers, no tracking, peer-to-peer, encrypted messages that spread through cell towers and radios like wildfire. A new app went viral, Burkina Live, a platform broadcasting real-time footage from resistance zones, youth rallies, and farming villages, reclaiming abandoned colonial lands. The app hit 1 million downloads in its first week across Africa. In Johannesburg, Julius Malema held a press conference. We were called radicals. Now they call us dangerous because we speak against imperial arrogance. I stand with Ibrahim Traoré, not because I must, but because Africa must never again bow. Crowds erupted. In Paris, President Emmanuel Macron was cornered by reporters. Is France still allied with the United States after the failed Burkina Faso mission? He paused. France supports regional stability, but will not be dragged into old mistakes. The French military presence in West Africa quietly downsized within a month. In Nairobi, Langley packed his briefcase. He had been officially reassigned. As he stood at the airport, a young Kenyan officer approached him. Sir, was it worth it? Everything? Langley stared at the tarmac. Ask me in 10 years. Inside Traoré's bunker, Sokolov brought in another visitor, a man in a black suit with a briefcase handcuffed to his wrist. The Chinese liaison placed the case on the table and opened it. Blueprints for a drone defense grid, powered by AI and fiber optic towers. Traoré leaned forward. The new Africa begins now. In Washington, the NSC scrambled. Economic retaliation was on the table, but even Biden's advisors warned a second attempt would only unify Africa further. Instead, the State Department issued a weak diplomatic outreach request. Traoré's reply, silence. Then something unexpected happened. From Berlin to Toronto to Tokyo, youth-led protests erupted in support of Burkina Faso. People marched with cardboard signs reading, "Hands off Traoré, Africa is not your lab." Langley failed because Africa woke up. In a rural village outside Bobo Dioulasso, Traoré visited an old teacher. She was blind now, but smiled when she heard his voice. You stood tall, Ibrahim. He held her hand gently. Only because they pushed us to the ground first. The world had changed, not with war, but with stories, with the voice of a captain who turned his scars into a shield for an entire continent. A storm brewed over Ouagadougou, thick clouds without rain, heavy with meaning. Inside the presidential compound, Captain Ibrahim Traoré walked the corridor with Khadija at his side. Their steps echoed like drums of war. We've stabilized our network, she said. The apps are active and Chinese satellites confirm full visual control of the northern corridor. But Traoré's face showed no satisfaction. Control means nothing if the rot is within. 2 nights earlier, an encrypted communique had been intercepted from within the Ministry of Defense, a message sent to an unknown node in Morocco. Its content was short. Phase 2 confirmed, he's vulnerable. Khadija had only one word for it. Betrayal. Traoré nodded. We're not facing one enemy, we're surrounded by hands pretending to pray. At a secure facility 20 miles outside the capital, Traoré met with an old comrade, General Diallo, commander of the Western Division, known as the Panther. Diallo sat silent, a blade resting across his knee. Whoever sent that message, they've been waiting, watching, maybe even placed before your rise. Traoré looked him dead in the eye. Are you still with me? Diallo didn't blink, until my bones turned to dust. But loyalty wasn't universal. In the southern city of Pau, Colonel Issaka Coulibaly, a man Traoré had once promoted, sat in a candlelit room with 4 other officers. You think he'll stop with the Americans? He's building something else? A continent united under one man. And that man is not elected. One officer responded cautiously, but he commands respect. Coulibaly leaned forward. So did Napoleon. Until Moscow froze him. They all nodded. In New York, UN Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield delivered a carefully crafted speech. Burkina Faso remains a priority for international partnership. However, the US remains deeply concerned by regional instability and the influence of foreign militaries operating beyond NATO supervision. Behind the diplomatic veil, the Pentagon had reactivated a black budget unit, Echo 9, its sole purpose, destabilize Traoré from within. A week later, a bombing rocked a community market in Bobo Dioulasso. 17 dead, 43 injured. Traoré flew in within hours. The scene was chaos, bodies, blood, shattered tiles and screams. But what chilled him most was the leaflet found on the ground, scattered like confetti. It read, "Your captain cannot shield you forever. Soon the lion will sleep." Khadija entered the bunker holding an evidence file. Sir, the explosive residue isn't from within our borders. It's traceable to an American arms shipment, one meant for East Africa. Traoré stared at the file. Langley's hand. She shook her head. Someone newer, someone sloppier. In Djibouti, an unknown figure stepped off a private jet. Former CIA operative, blacklisted after a failed operation in Syria. His name, Marcus D. Wynn. He lit a cigarette and spoke into a burner phone. I'm in. Echo 9 is green. First task, turn the Panther. Back in Burkina, General Diallo received a strange letter, unsigned, sealed with wax. Inside was a photo of his granddaughter walking to school, followed by 2 shadows. A whisper followed. Choose wisely. Lions bleed too. That night, Diallo requested an urgent meeting with Traoré, but the captain was already 2 steps ahead. As Diallo entered the war room, 10 guards surrounded him. Khadija stepped forward. We found your second phone, General. Diallo didn't fight, he simply sat. I was protecting my blood, but I never lifted a hand against you. Traoré stood silent. Then protect them now. Speak. Who else is Echo across the border? In Ghana, Colonel Coulibaly slipped across in plain clothes. He was greeted by Marcus Wynn himself. You ready to finish what your president started? Coulibaly shook his head. I'm ready to correct it. 3 days later, a military convoy traveling north from Ouagadougou was ambushed. The attackers wore Burkina uniforms, but they moved like mercenaries. Traoré's elite guards held the line. Drones captured the footage. The truth spread fast. A coup attempt was underway. Within the hour, Traoré appeared live on Burkina Live, speaking straight into the camera. To my people, stay strong. There are shadows in our ranks, but this is our land, our story. No foreign mercenary, no traitor will write our end. The streets filled once more, this time with makeshift barricades. Taxi drivers used their cars as roadblocks. Market women formed human chains. Students broadcast live feeds from rooftops. This was no longer a government's defense, it was a nation's stand. Inside a U.S. command post in Lagos, General Langley sat alone, watching the chaos unfold. His successor in the Africa Command had gone silent. An aide approached. "Sir, should we interfere?" Langley didn't look away. "Number, we already tried. The script no longer belongs to us." Back in Ouagadougou, Khadija entered Traoré's chamber. We held, Coulibaly fled. Diallo's confession named 3 others. They're in custody. Traoré closed his eyes. Then this was just the beginning. She frowned. What now? He opened a dusty folder. The label read PANTHER, Pan-African Treaty for Homeland Emergency Response. A unified African defense pact. Secret for now, but real. The true war wasn't just for power. It was for a future where no lions stood alone. The sun rose over Ouagadougou with a strange quiet. Markets reopened, smoke cleared from alleys once filled with gunfire. The coup had failed, but the cost was high. 42 civilians dead, dozens of soldiers defected or captured. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood on the steps of the military headquarters, his uniform stained, his face unreadable. He looked out at a small crowd, elders, women, and children, and said simply, "We bleed, but we do not fall." The people bowed their heads. Some wept. Inside the war room, Khadija reviewed a file. "Sir, the digital forensics confirmed it. Marcus Wynne was behind the internal breach. He infiltrated our systems 2 days before the attack using a cloned line from Nairobi." Traoré nodded. "And Coulibaly?" "Escaped. He crossed into Senegal, but we have eyes on him." Traoré closed the file. No more silence, no more shadows. Meanwhile, in Dakar, Coulibaly walked into an abandoned French consulate. He was met by 3 men in suits. Private security, ex-Blackwater. He handed them a drive. Everything I gathered, Traoré's base layouts, communication structures. He's vulnerable. One of them spoke quietly. "And why should we believe a traitor? Because I don't want an empire, I want balance." In Washington, D.C., Langley stood on a balcony at the Pentagon. The African file had been transferred to civilian diplomacy. His career was finished, but his mission, not yet. A secure call came in. Marcus Wynne just made contact. "He's activating his last card." Langley paused. "Pull the plug, sir." "You heard me, no more blood, we lost. It's over." But it wasn't over. In a dark room in Morocco, Marcus Wynne stared at a screen. His eyes were bloodshot. The room was filled with server racks, humming like vultures circling a battlefield. He spoke into a recorder. Final phase, codenamed Black Lion. Digital chaos, psychological terror. We destroy his voice. Within hours, the servers began their assault. Burkina Live went dark. The blockchain nodes were hit with a rare quantum exploit. Traoré's public image, digitally altered, began appearing online, showing him burning flags, mocking the people, even plotting with Russians. The public was confused. Some believed it. Protests flickered like dying embers. Whispers of doubt spread in a classroom. A boy asked his mother, "Is Traoré really the good guy?" In the war of perception, Marcus was winning. Khadija stormed into the comm center. "Sir, it's happening. Deep fakes, spoofed footage. Our data is compromised." Traoré remained calm. "Then we do what they can't." She frowned. "What?" He handed her a handwritten speech. "Old school. We speak from the heart." in the open, to every village, every elder, every youth. That night, Traoré stood under a tree in Koudougou, a historic site where revolutionaries once swore their oaths in the 1960s. A single camera, a single mic, no filters. I am Ibrahim Traoré, and I have no machines protecting me now, only my people. He recounted every step, the betrayals, the bombs, the American shadows, the digital war. He ended with, "If I fall, let it be with truth in my mouth, not silence." The video spread like wildfire. Peer-to-peer, radio waves, even printed transcripts hand-delivered to remote villages. The people listened. The people returned. In Nairobi, Langley watched from his hotel room. He smiled for the first time in months. The damn kid turned it around. He made one last call to a back channel in the UN, pull Win, erase the cell. Time to end this, not escalate it. The next morning, Marcus Wynn was found dead in a Marrakesh hotel room, cause unknown. 2 weeks later, Traoré hosted a summit, discreet, in a forest compound outside Bamako, Mali. 11 African heads of state arrived. He stood before them and unveiled the PANTHER alliance. A treaty, a commitment, one continent, one defense grid, independent from NATO, Russia, China, or the US. Not everyone signed, but 3 did that day and 4 more by month's end. The alliance had no tanks, no jets, just satellites, communication towers, shared intel, cultural pride, but it was enough. Enough to scare the old powers, enough to protect the new ones. In Washington, the State Department issued a bland statement: "We respect Africa's evolving security partnerships and remain committed to open dialogue." Behind closed doors, however, the Pentagon restructured its Africa Command. Langley retired quietly, no book deal, no press tour, just silence. And a new African map hanging on his wall. Months passed. Traoré still wore his uniform, still walked with Khadija at his side, but his eyes were older now, not tired, just deeper. He visited schools. He launched a scholarship named after the victims of the market bombing. He planted trees in cities that once saw tanks. One afternoon, he returned to that same tree in Koudougou, alone. A little girl approached him with a phone. "Are you the president?" He smiled. "I'm just someone who didn't stay quiet." The wind blew gently, a continent listened, and history, for once, listened back.